Leon Graves was 44 years old, and until that Friday evening, he had given his marriage everything a man could give. 15 years, unwavering loyalty, and a quiet, steady love that never asked for applause. He'd built Graves Logistics Group from a single truck and a storage unit in Memphis into something that would make history. That same afternoon, he had signed a $700 million federal infrastructure contract, the largest ever awarded to a black-owned logistics firm in the United States. He drove home in his old F-150 with the contract in his briefcase, ready to tell his wife everything. Instead, his wife humiliated him at dinner, in his own home, at his own table, in front of her friends, her mother, and a man he didn't yet recognize, but whose name he would soon know very well. She told the room, "He does trucking." Her mother announced that some women were still waiting to feel secure in their marriages. And Adrienne laughed, not nervously, not apologetically. She laughed in agreement. Leon said nothing. He cut his steak. He folded his napkin. And somewhere between that table and that silence, he made a decision his wife never saw coming, because she never once considered that the man she was humiliating had already changed everything. Before we jump into the story, comment where in the world you are watching from and subscribe, because tomorrow's story is one you need to hear. Leon Graves sat in the hushed downtown Memphis conference room, a simple ballpoint pen poised in his right hand. Through the tall windows, the late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the polished mahogany table. The federal contract before him was thick, 700 pages of dense legal text that represented the culmination of 15 years of quiet, relentless work. His attorney and oldest friend, Victor Lang, stood beside him, one hand resting supportively on the back of Leon's chair. Across the table, 4 federal representatives and their legal team watched in professional silence. Leon glanced down at the pen, the same type he'd used to sign his first freight contract 15 years ago, on the hood of his used F-150. He'd kept using the same cheap ballpoints ever since, even as his company grew. Some habits just stuck with you. He opened his wallet and touched the worn photo tucked inside. Not of Adrienne, but of his mother standing proudly outside that first warehouse in North Memphis. She'd worked 2 jobs to help him get that initial truck, believing in him without question. The photo was creased at the corners, but her smile remained clear and bright. $700 million. The number felt almost unreal. But the path here had been anything but magical. Just 15 years of 18-hour days, careful planning, and reinvesting every spare dollar back into the company. Building his fleet 1 truck at a time. Training and hiring folks from his old neighborhood whenever he could. Growing slow and steady, the way his mother had taught him. Graves Logistics Group now employed over 300 people, managed a fleet of 200 trucks, and coordinated infrastructure logistics across 6 states. All of it built without flash or fanfare. Leon had never needed anyone to notice what he was building. He just needed it to work. His hand moved to sign, then paused for just a moment as Adrienne crossed his mind. He should call her, share the news. This was the kind of moment couples were supposed to celebrate together. But something made him hesitate. He'd tell her at dinner instead. He wanted to see her face when she heard. The slight hesitation in his own impulse caught his attention, but he didn't examine it too closely. Not now. This moment was about the contract, about the company, about the next chapter. He signed his name in clean, precise strokes. No flourish, no ceremony. Just like everything else he'd built. Practical, purposeful, done right. "Congratulations, Mr. Graves," the lead federal representative said, extending his hand. "This is historic. You've just become the largest black-owned logistics contractor in federal infrastructure history." Leon shook his hand firmly, nodding his thanks. He'd never been one for big words or speeches. The work would speak for itself, just as it always had. Victor squeezed his shoulder. $700 million, Leon. You did it. We did it, Leon corrected quietly, including not just Victor, but thinking of every employee who'd helped build this moment. He gathered the contract pages carefully, sliding them into his leather briefcase, another item he'd had since the beginning, now worn smooth at the corners but still sturdy. Like everything in his life, he chose things that lasted. Standing up, Leon straightened his tie, a simple navy blue against his white shirt. No designer labels, nothing flashy, just clean and professional, like always. The press release goes out in 3 weeks, Victor reminded him as they walked toward the elevator. Want me to have the PR team prepare any special statements? Leon shook his head. The numbers can speak for themselves. The building's lobby was nearly empty as they crossed it, their footsteps echoing on the marble floor. Outside, the Memphis afternoon was cooling into evening, the air heavy with approaching summer. His F-150 sat in the parking lot, 10 years old but perfectly maintained. Leon had bought it used when the company first started making real profit. He could have replaced it a dozen times over since then, but it ran fine, and he saw no reason to change. He placed his briefcase carefully on the passenger seat, the contract secure inside. Victor's BMW pulled away with a wave, but Leon sat for a moment in the familiar comfort of his truck's worn leather seats. $700 million, and he was still driving the same vehicle, wearing the same kinds of clothes, living the same way he always had. Some people needed everyone to know their worth. Leon had never been one of them. He started the engine and pulled out into traffic, heading home alone with history riding quietly beside him in a leather briefcase. Leon pulled into his driveway at 8, surprised to see several unfamiliar luxury cars parked along the curb. Light and laughter spilled from the windows of his 2-story colonial. His stomach tightened. Adrian had planned another dinner party without telling him. He grabbed his briefcase from the passenger seat, the contract still safely inside. Music drifted through the front door as he entered, along with the clink of wine glasses and the murmur of conversation from the dining room. Adrienne stood near the kitchen island in a fitted black dress, wine glass in hand, holding court among their guests. She glanced his way, her perfectly made-up face showing a flicker of annoyance. "You could have texted," she said, then turned back to her conversation without waiting for a response. Leon recognized most of the faces around his dining table. Philip, Adrian's brother, sat with his wife, Jennifer. Nadine, Adrian's mother, occupied her usual place at the far end. 2 of Adrian's closest friends were there with their husbands, men who worked in finance and law, all wearing sport coats that probably cost more than Leon's entire outfit. But there was one face he didn't know, a well-dressed man in his late 30s who moved through Leon's kitchen with unsettling familiarity, reaching for wine glasses like he knew exactly where they were kept. "Leon!" Philip called out, raising his wine glass. "Finally joining us? We're already on the second course." Leon took his seat quietly, noting how his plain work clothes contrasted with the other's polished evening wear. A server, another surprise, placed a plate in front of him. "What's Leon been up to lately?" one of Adrienne's friends asked, her tone carrying that particular blend of politeness and dismissal that Leon had grown used to in these circles. Before he could answer, Adrienne jumped in. "Oh, Leon does trucking," she said with a light laugh, waving her hand dismissively. The table responded with knowing chuckles, as if she'd just explained everything about him in those 3 words. Leon cut into his steak, keeping his face neutral. The contract in his briefcase suddenly felt very heavy, even in the other room. "You know?" Philip leaned forward, swirling his wine with the expertise of someone who wanted everyone to notice his expertise. "The whole logistics industry is going digital now. Everything's about automation, AI-driven supply chains." He raised an eyebrow at Leon. "Have you thought about pivoting? Modernizing a bit?" The stranger, Cole, Leon heard someone call him, was refilling Adrienne's wine glass again. his hand lingering near her shoulder just a moment too long. "Some businesses just resist change," Philip continued, not waiting for Leon's response. "But you can't stay old school forever, right?" Leon took another bite of his steak, chewing slowly. He thought about his fleet of GPS-equipped trucks, his custom-developed routing software, the automated warehouse system he'd implemented last year. But he said nothing. These people had never been interested in the reality of what he built. Nadine set down her fork, dabbing her lips with her napkin. "You know who I ran into at the club yesterday?" Sarah Mitchell. Her husband just made partner at Richardson and Hayes. She turned to Adrienne, her voice carrying clearly across the table. "Now, that's the kind of husband who makes a woman feel secure." She paused, her next words falling like carefully placed stones into still water. "Some women are still waiting for that feeling." The table went quiet for one heavy second. Then Adrienne laughed. Not a nervous laugh, not an embarrassed laugh, but a laugh of pure agreement, the kind that confirmed everything. Cole touched her elbow as he topped off her wine again, and Leon watched the casual intimacy of the gesture. He cut another piece of his steak, his movements measured and precise. The contract that would reshape their entire lives sat in his briefcase in the next room. The press release that would shock this entire table was just 3 weeks away. But looking at his wife laughing with this stranger in his house, watching her brother's smug smile and her mother's satisfied expression, Leon made his decision. He would not tell them. Not tonight. Not from anger or spite, but from something much colder and clearer. The sudden crystalline understanding that they didn't deserve to know. Let them live in their version of him a little longer. Leon finished his meal in silence, each bite mechanical and tasteless. He folded his napkin with careful precision, setting it beside his plate as Adrienne's laughter mixed with Cole's across the table. The kitchen was still dark when Leon made his way downstairs at 5:30. Dawn hadn't broken yet, and the house felt different in these quiet hours. More honest somehow, stripped of its performances. He started the coffee maker, its soft gurgling the only sound in the empty space. While the coffee brewed, he stood at the kitchen island, his hands flat on the cool granite. The events of last night played through his mind without the cushion of shock that had carried him through dinner. Each laugh, each glance, each casual touch. They arranged themselves differently now, like puzzle pieces finally clicking into their true positions. The coffee maker beeped. Leon poured himself a cup, black, and returned to the island. His gaze fell on Adrienne's phone, lying face down on the counter where she'd left it last night. He realized, with the clarity that comes from finally allowing yourself to see what's been in front of you, that her phone was always face down these days. Not sometimes, always. The memory of Cole moving through his kitchen surfaced again. The way he'd reached for the wine glasses without hesitation, knowing exactly which cabinet they were in. The casual familiarity of someone who'd been there before, probably many times. How many dinners had there been when Leon was working late? How many glasses of wine? Morning light began creeping through the kitchen windows as Leon sipped his coffee. His eyes landed on a stack of mail near the edge of the counter. On top was a credit card statement, partially visible through the envelope's window. Something made him pull it out. The statement was in Adrienne's name, her personal card, the one she'd insisted on keeping separate, for simplicity. Leon scanned the charges until he found it. The Hermitage Hotel, Nashville. 3 nights, 2 weekends ago. The same weekend, Adrienne had told him she was at a spa retreat with her friends in Gatlinburg. The amount wasn't what caught his attention. It was the casualness of the lie. She hadn't even bothered to use a different card or hide the statement. Why would she? He had never questioned her before. Leon took out his phone and carefully photographed the statement, making sure the hotel name, dates, and amounts were clearly visible. Then he replaced it exactly as he'd found it. He pulled up his contacts and called Brenda. His sister always woke early, a habit from their childhood when their mother worked 2 jobs and someone had to make sure homework was done before school. She answered on the second ring. "You're up early. Got a minute? For you?" "Always." There was a pause. "Something's wrong." Leon described the dinner party, the dismissive comments, Cole's presence, Philip's smugness, Nadine's calculated cruelty. He kept his voice low, though he knew Adrienne wouldn't be up for hours. When he finished, there was a long silence on the other end. "How long have you been keeping your business accounts separate from the joint accounts?" Brenda finally asked. Her tone had shifted from sister to forensic accountant. "Always, since day one." "Good," she said. "Don't change anything. Don't move anything." "And Leon?" "Yeah?" "Don't tell Adrienne about the contract." "I wasn't planning to." "I know," Brenda replied. "That's why I'm not worried about you." She paused again. "I'm going to make some calls." Leon hung up and poured himself a second cup of coffee. Upstairs, he could hear Adrienne beginning to stir. Soon she would come down, perfectly put together, ready for another day of whatever life she was really living. She would kiss his cheek, perhaps. A performance for an audience that had stopped believing in it long ago. He washed his coffee cup, dried it, and returned it to its exact spot in the cabinet. Everything in its place, nothing disturbed. The contract waited in his briefcase by the door. The photo of the hotel charge sat in his phone. And in his mind, a decision had solidified. Not with anger or drama, but with the same quiet precision he'd used to build his company from the ground up. Leon gathered his things and headed for the door. It was time to go to work. Leon was reviewing shipping manifests when Brenda walked into his office, a thick manila folder tucked under her arm. She closed the door behind her with a soft click that somehow felt final. Her expression was controlled, professional, the face she wore when delivering difficult news to clients. "You got a minute?" she asked, though she was already settling into one of the chairs across from his desk. Leon set down his pen. "That bad?" "It's organized," Brenda said, opening the folder. "That's what makes it worse. This wasn't impulse spending or poor management. This was planned." She laid out a series of documents on his desk. Bank statements, transfer records, investment account summaries. Each page was highlighted and annotated in Brenda's precise handwriting. Leon recognized some of the accounts, joint savings he and Adrienne had built over years. Others were unfamiliar. "Over the past 14 months, Brenda began, approximately $340,000 has been systematically moved out of your joint accounts through a series of transfers. They're labeled as investment management fees to Philip's firm, Whitefield Financial Advisory." Leon studied the documents. The transfers were regular, spaced out to avoid attention. Some were as small as $5,000, others as large as $30,000. All of them authorized by Adrienne, who had equal access to the accounts. "Philip's been taking a cut," Brenda continued, "about 8% of each transfer. The rest moves through shell accounts before landing in places I haven't been able to trace yet. But the pattern is clear. Adrienne's been liquidating your joint savings, and your brother-in-law's been helping her do it." Leon picked up one of the statements, noting the dates. 14 months ago. Around the time the federal contract bid began gaining traction. Around the time Cole started showing up at their social events. "The timing isn't coincidental," Brenda said, reading his thoughts. "This started right when the company's profile began rising. She's been planning her exit, Leon. And she's been using Philip to help her build her parachute." Leon set the statement down. His hands were steady. "How exposed am I?" Brenda's expression shifted slightly, the first hint of satisfaction he'd seen since she walked in. "That's the one piece of good news. Remember when Victor insisted you structure the company as a separate LLC back when you were just starting? And how he made sure all the business accounts were solely in your name and the company's name?" Leon nodded. "Under Tennessee law, business assets established before marriage and maintained separately throughout remain individual property. The company, the contracts, The equipment, the accounts, none of it qualifies as marital property. She can't touch any of it. Brenda gathered the documents back into a neat pile. What she's been stealing is your joint liquid savings. It's real money. $340,000 isn't nothing. But compared to what she thought she was going to get, Brenda allowed herself a small smile. She's been trying to rob a bank by taking quarters from the fountain out front. Leon sat back in his chair, processing. The scope of it struck him. Not just the theft, but the patience behind it. 14 months of calculated transfers. 14 months of dinner parties and social appearances, while she and her brother methodically drained accounts they thought were the full measure of his worth. He reached for his phone and dialed Victor's number. His attorney picked up on the first ring. "I need divorce mode," Leon said simply. There was no surprise in Victor's voice, no hesitation. Just 4 words that told Leon everything he needed to know about how long his oldest friend had seen this coming. "I've already started." After Victor hung up, Leon sat in silence for a moment, looking at the documents spread across his desk. Each transfer record, each falsified fee, they were more than just proof of theft. They were a record of contempt. Every transaction was a statement. You are not enough. What you built is not enough. We will take what we can because that's all you're worth. Brenda watched her brother, recognizing the stillness that had always preceded his most decisive action. "Do you want me to dig deeper?" she asked. "I can trace where the money went after the shell accounts." "No," Leon said, his voice quiet but certain. "We have what we need. The rest is just details." Through his office window, he could see the warehouse floor below. Trucks being loaded, workers moving with purpose, the steady hum of the empire he'd built from nothing. The empire Adrian and her family had dismissed as trucking. The empire that was about to become their education in what real wealth looked like. A plain manila envelope sat on Leon's desk, delivered by courier from Victor's office. No note attached, just his name printed in Victor's precise handwriting. Leon knew what it contained before he opened it. The results of the private investigator's work. He'd authorized the investigation a week ago, after Brenda's financial revelations. He poured himself a fresh cup of coffee, black like always, and settled into his chair. The morning sun streamed through his office windows, casting long shadows across the desk. From 3 floors up, he could hear the distant beep of forklifts on the warehouse floor below, the steady rhythm of honest work. Leon opened the envelope and began reading. Cole Richard Ashford, 38 years old, commercial real estate developer with Pinnacle Properties, graduate of Vanderbilt, member of 3 country clubs. The file contained photographs, Cole and Adrian entering hotels, having lunch at upscale restaurants, walking together in Overton Park. The timestamps went back 22 months. 22 months. Nearly 2 years of lies. Hotel receipts painted a pattern. The Westin downtown, the boutique hotel in Nashville where Adrian claimed she'd been at a spa, weekend trips to Atlanta disguised as visits to her mother. Except Nadine had known. The photos showed Cole at Sunday brunches with the Whitfield family, Nadine smiling at him across white tablecloths, while Leon worked weekends trying to land the federal contract. Philip was in several photos, too. Golf clubs slung over his shoulder, sharing cigars with Cole on the country club terrace. The same brother-in-law who had been helping steal from Leon's accounts had been socializing with his wife's lover, treating him like family. Then came the text messages. The investigator had obtained them legally. Victor had been careful about that. They were conversations between Adrian and her closest friend Sarah, dated 6 months ago. Leon read them slowly, letting each word settle. Adrian, met with the attorney today. She says I need to document everything. Sarah, are you sure about this? Adrian, he's never going to be what I need. Just dead weight holding me back. Cole gets it. Cole's going places. Sarah, what about the business? Leon works hard. Adrian. Trucking? Please. Cole's developing luxury properties. He understands my world. Leon's never going to leave North Memphis behind. The timestamp on those messages. The same week Leon's company had made the shortlist for the federal infrastructure contract. While he was in Washington, D.C., presenting to the review board, his wife had been planning her exit with a man who understood her world. Leon set the file down. He lifted his coffee cup, noticed it had gone cold. The silence in his office felt dense, like air before a storm. He did not cry. The part of him capable of that kind of pain had calcified into something else, something precise and patient. He thought about Cole at his dinner table 2 weeks ago, reaching across Leon's kitchen counter for wine glasses he shouldn't have known how to find. He thought about Nadine's comment about security, about Philip's smirk, about Adrienne's laugh. They had all known. They had sat there, eating his food, drinking his wine, while Cole moved through his home with the confidence of a man who had already claimed it. The photos showed Cole driving a new Mercedes, wearing tailored suits, projecting the kind of wealth that existed primarily in image. Leon had seen his type before. Men who built their empires on borrowed money and borrowed time. Men who measured success by how it looked, rather than what it was. Leon gathered the photos, the receipts, and the text messages. He added them to the growing folder that contained Brenda's financial report. Evidence accumulating like layers of sediment, forming a foundation for what would come next. Outside his office, the warehouse hummed with activity. Trucks were being loaded, shipments logged, workers going about their day with the quiet competence he had always valued. Real work, real value. Everything he had built, piece by piece, while Adrienne and her family mistook his patience for weakness. He slid the folder into his desk drawer, letting it rest beside the federal contract that would soon change everything. The contract they didn't know about. The contract that would make their assumptions about trucking look like exactly what they were. The shallow judgments of people who had never built anything real. The drawer closed with a soft click. Sunlight spilled through the windows of Leon's home office, casting long shadows across the hardwood floor. Through the partially open window, the distant sound of church bells marked another quiet Sunday afternoon in Memphis. Victor Lang spread documents across Leon's desk with practiced precision, while Brenda arranged her forensic reports in neat stacks. Adrienne was at her usual Sunday brunch with friends, a ritual that had once seemed innocent, but now carried the weight of what Leon knew about those gatherings. He could picture Cole there, probably seated beside her at some trendy East Memphis restaurant, both of them unaware of what was about to unfold. "Let's start with your position," Victor said, tapping a folder embossed with his law firm's logo. "The federal contract, all $700 million, is completely insulated as business income. The company structure we put in place years ago is doing exactly what it was designed to do. Graves Logistics Group, LLC, is your separate property under Tennessee law." Leon nodded, remembering the day years ago when Victor had insisted on that particular structure. "You were thinking ahead." "I was doing my job," Victor replied simply. "Now, regarding the financial fraud, Brenda's forensic report gives us significant leverage. The $340,000 in transfers through Philip's firm? That's not just divorce litigation material. That's actionable civil fraud, possibly criminal exposure, for unlicensed financial advising." Brenda opened her laptop, pulling up spreadsheets that tracked every transfer. "The pattern is clear," she said. "Regular transfers disguised as management fees, all flowing through Philip's firm. He took his cut each time, about 15%. We have the complete paper trail. Because you're filing first," Victor continued, "you control both the framing and jurisdiction. Adrienne's prior consultations with divorce attorneys actually work in our favor, especially combined with the documented theft. It significantly weakens her moral and legal position." Leon studied the timeline Victor had laid out. And the timing? Victor's expression remained neutral, but there was a glint of strategic satisfaction in his eyes. The federal contract goes public in 3 weeks. Trade press, business journals, local news, it'll be everywhere. I propose we file the divorce petition the morning after the announcement. So she learns about the contract and receives divorce papers in the same 24 hours, Brenda said, looking up from her laptop. Exactly, Victor confirmed. The petition will include Brenda's full forensic report. Adrian and Philip will understand immediately how exposed they are. We'll offer a settlement framework that's fair but firm. She gets her legitimate share of marital liquid assets, minus documented theft. She'll have no grounds to contest it. Leon picked up one of Brenda's reports, scanning the meticulous documentation of his wife's betrayal. And Philip? We file a separate civil action against him personally, Victor said. Recovery of misappropriated funds, with interest and damages. The threat of professional exposure usually motivates quick settlements in cases like this. Brenda closed her laptop. The forensic report is court-ready. Every transfer, every fee, every false designation. It's all there. No gaps, no assumptions, just facts. Leon stood and walked to the window, looking out at the Sunday afternoon. Somewhere across town, Adrian was laughing with friends, perhaps planning her next move, unaware that her carefully constructed exit strategy was about to collapse. 3 weeks, he said quietly. Are you sure about the timing? Brenda asked. We could file sooner. Leon turned back to face them both. The same stillness that had served him for decades, building his company, absorbing Adrian's contempt, watching her family's schemes, settled over him now. I've been sure since the dinner. Victor gathered the documents into organized sections. I'll have everything ready. The moment the contract hits the news, we move. The company announcement goes out at 9, Leon said. File at 9:02. Brenda started packing up her laptop. What do we do until then? Nothing changes, Leon replied. I go to work. The company prepares for the contract. Adrian keeps thinking she has the upper hand. The afternoon sun had shifted, throwing different shadows across the room. Through the window, another set of church bells rang, marking time, marking change, marking the distance between what was and what would be. The Memphis Business Journal headline blazed across Leon's computer screen. Graves Logistics Group secures historic $700 federal infrastructure contract, largest award to black-owned logistics firm in U.S. history. His photo accompanied the article, showing him in his office, hands clasped on his desk, expression steady and focused. Within minutes, his phone lit up. First came the industry news alerts, then the local TV stations. Channel 5 wanted an interview. Channel 13 was already running the story in their afternoon business segment. The Memphis Commercial Appeal needed a quote. His employees had seen the news too. Through his office windows, Leon could see them gathering in small groups, their excitement radiating through the building. Desiree, his CFO, stuck her head in his door with a broad smile. Boss, the warehouse crew is asking if we can order pizza for everyone. They want to celebrate. Leon nodded, reaching for his wallet. Make it happen. Every shift, including night crew. His phone buzzed again. Old freight contacts from his early days, when he was running single routes in that first truck. Men he hadn't spoken to in years called to congratulate him. Victor left a brief voicemail. It's everywhere. Perfect timing. Brenda texted. Watching Channel 5 right now. You did it, big brother. The celebration in the warehouse grew louder. Leon could hear cheering through his office walls. These were his people, the ones who had believed in the vision, who had shown up every day, who had helped build something real while others dismissed it as just trucking. At 6:18 p.m., as Leon was finishing up some paperwork, his phone lit up with Adrienne's name. He let it ring twice before answering. Leon. Her voice was different, careful, measured, like someone walking on new ice. I saw the news. Yeah. He kept his response flat, neutral. A pause stretched between them. "Why didn't you tell me?" "I was waiting for the right time." He shuffled some papers on his desk, deliberately casual. "How's brunch?" Before she could respond, he ended the call. When he arrived home that evening, the house smelled of cooking. Adrian had prepared his favorite, grilled salmon with roasted vegetables. She'd set the dining room table with their best plates, lit candles, opened a bottle of wine. "I thought we should celebrate," she said, touching his arm as he walked in. Her smile was bright, practiced. "This is huge, Leon. The largest contract ever? Why didn't you say anything?" Leon hung up his jacket. "Been busy with the details." "Tell me about it," she said, guiding him to the table. "What does this mean for the company?" "For us?" He noticed how she emphasized that last word, us, as if there still was one. Throughout dinner, Adrian performed her role perfectly. She asked intelligent questions about the contract's scope. She reminisced about the early days of the company. She laughed at all the right moments. Her hand kept finding reasons to touch his arm, his shoulder. Leon watched her recalculation playing out in real time. He could almost see the numbers shifting behind her eyes. The divorce settlement she'd planned for versus what might be possible now. The future she'd arranged with Cole versus this new potential reality. He answered her questions politely. He ate her carefully prepared meal. He maintained just enough warmth to keep her performance going. But he gave her nothing real, nothing she could grab onto. "We should plan a celebration," she suggested, pouring more wine. "Invite friends over. Do it properly." "Maybe," Leon said. "We'll see." Later, as they prepared for bed, Adrian tried one more time. "I'm proud of you," she said, her voice soft. "I know I don't say it enough." Leon nodded, set his alarm, and turned out his light. The next morning, he woke early, as usual. Adrienne was still asleep, her face peaceful in the dim light. Leon dressed quietly and left for work. At exactly 9:02 a.m., as he pulled into his parking spot at Graves Logistics, his phone buzzed with a text from Victor, "Filing complete." The doorbell rang at 12:15 p.m. Adrienne opened the door to find a process server holding a manila envelope. Her hand trembled slightly as she signed for it. Inside, the papers were crisp and official. A petition for divorce, filed that morning by Victor Lang on behalf of Leon Graves. She sank into the nearest chair, scanning the documents with growing horror. Terms like financial malfeasance and breach of fiduciary duty jumped from the pages. The petition referenced exhibits, banking records, transfer documentation, detailed timelines of funds moved through Philip's firm. Her fingers fumbled with her phone as she dialed Leon, straight to voicemail. Again and again. By the sixth call, her hands were shaking so badly she could barely hold the phone. She grabbed her keys and drove to Philip's office, running at least 2 yellow lights. The receptionist tried to stop her, but Adrienne burst through the door to find her brother on a client call. One look at her face, and Philip quickly ended his conversation. "They know everything," she said, dropping the divorce papers on his desk. "The transfers, the fees, all of it." Philip scanned the documents, his face growing paler with each page. "This is detailed, very detailed. Who did this analysis?" "His sister, the accountant." Adrienne paced the office. "What do we do?" "We need to call our attorney. Now." Philip reached for his phone, then paused. "Have you spoken to Leon?" "He won't answer my calls." She collapsed into a chair. "How did we not know? The contract, the company's value, all of it was happening right under our noses, and we had no idea." At 7:30 that evening, Adrienne pulled into their driveway. Leon's truck was there. The porch light was on. She sat in her car for several minutes, gathering courage, before walking to the door. She expected to have to knock, but Leon opened it before she could raise her hand. His face was calm, unreadable. He stepped aside to let her in. The house smelled of coffee. Leon walked to the kitchen island and sat in what she now realized was his regular morning spot. She wondered how many quiet dawns he had spent here, watching their marriage unravel while she slept upstairs. "Leon, please." Her voice cracked slightly. "We need to talk about this." He gestured to the seat across from him, but said nothing. 15 years, she began. We've built a life together. Everything we've worked for, everything we've created. We can't just throw that away. She tried to catch his eye, but his gaze remained steady, neutral. "I know I've been distant. I know things haven't been right between us. I was going through something, feeling lost, questioning everything." She talked about their early days, about the dreams they'd shared. She mentioned the house they'd bought together, their first furniture shopping trip, the garden she'd planted in their second spring. Her words tumbled out faster as she went on, trying to find something that would crack his stillness. "We can fix this," she insisted. "We can get counseling, take time to reconnect. This doesn't have to be the end." Throughout her entire speech, she never once mentioned Cole's name. When she finally ran out of words, Leon reached for a thick folder on the counter beside him. Without speaking, he slid it across the granite surface toward her. Adrienne opened it slowly. The first page was a detailed forensic accounting report, showing every transfer from their joint accounts over the past 14 months. Next came bank statements, highlighting the $340,000 moved through Philip's firm. There were copies of fee structures, timing analyses, pattern documentation. Then came the text messages. Her own words stared back at her. "He's never going to be what I need. Dead weight. Cole gets it." She closed the folder, her hands trembling slightly. "I'm not angry," Leon said quietly. His voice was calm, almost gentle. "I want you to understand that. I'm not angry. I'm just done." "How long?" She couldn't quite meet his eyes. "How long have you known?" "Long enough." The silence stretched between them, heavy with 15 years of shared history and shattered trust. "I need you to leave my house now," Leon said softly. Adrienne stood, clutching the folder to her chest. She walked to the door on unsteady legs, her heels clicking against the hardwood floors she'd chosen years ago. The sound seemed impossibly loud in the quiet house. She paused at the threshold, but Leon had already turned away. The door clicked shut behind her, followed by the decisive sound of the deadbolt sliding home. The Rendezvous restaurant sat quiet in the late afternoon lull between lunch and dinner service. Leon arrived 15 minutes early, choosing a corner booth with clear sightlines to the door. The waiter brought water without being asked. Through the front windows, Leon watched them arrive together. Adrienne, Philip, and Nadine emerging from Philip's Mercedes like a coordinated unit. They'd clearly met beforehand to strategize. Nadine wore her battle armor, a tailored St. John suit, and pearls that caught the autumn sunlight. Philip carried his leather portfolio, no doubt filled with settlement proposals and negotiating points. Adrienne walked between them, her shoulders set with practiced poise. The hostess led them to the booth. No one spoke as they settled into their seats across from Leon. The tension felt physical, like humidity before a storm. "Thank you for coming," Leon said, his voice carrying the same measured calm he used in board meetings. He gestured to the waiter. "Coffee for everyone?" Philip started to decline, but Leon had already nodded to the server. 4 cups arrived promptly, steam rising in the cool, air-conditioned space. Leon took his time adding cream to his coffee, stirring it precisely. The small sounds, spoon against porcelain, ice shifting in water glasses, seemed amplified in the weighted silence. "I'll keep this brief," he said finally, setting his spoon down. He turned to Philip first, meeting his brother-in-law's attempt at a confident stare. "The complete documentation of the $340,000 in transfers, including your fee structures and routing records, has been forwarded to the Tennessee Department of Commerce for investigation into unlicensed financial advising and civil fraud." Leon's tone remained conversational, as though discussing the weather. Victor filed a civil suit this morning for full recovery plus damages. It names you personally, not your firm. Philip's face drained of color. His fingers tightened on his portfolio. You have two options, Leon continued. Return the money in full by end of week. Sign a complete withdrawal from any involvement in the proceedings, and we handle this quietly. Or we let the investigation proceed, and the civil suit becomes public record. He sipped his coffee. Your choice. Philip opened his mouth, closed it, then reached shakily for his water glass. Leon turned to Nadine. Her perfect posture had stiffened further. Her manicured fingers wrapped white-knuckled around her untouched coffee cup. I know you were present at 2 attorney consultations, he said softly. I know you co-signed the retainer loan. I'm not here to threaten you with anything, Nadine. I simply want you to know that I know. He leaned forward slightly. I want you to understand exactly what you helped destroy. Your daughter had a husband who would have given her everything. Security, loyalty, a lifetime of growth. And you helped her throw that away because it didn't look the way you thought it should. For the first time in 15 years, Nadine Whitfield had nothing to say. I want you to carry that, Leon finished quietly. Finally, he turned to Adrienne. She met his gaze with effort, her carefully applied makeup not quite hiding the shadows under her eyes. The current market value of Graves Logistics Group, including assets and projected revenue from the federal contract over the next 5 years, is just under $1 billion. He delivered the number without emphasis. The company's structure, which Victor helped establish years ago, keeps it entirely separate from marital assets. Your settlement will reflect liquid joint holdings only, reduced, of course, by the documented theft. Adrienne's face cycled through emotions: shock, grief, fury, devastation. The calculations running behind her eyes were visible. The magnitude of what she'd had, what she'd thrown away, what she was left with. Leon finished his coffee and stood unhurried, buttoning his jacket with practiced ease. He looked at all 3 of them, these people who had sat at his table, and decided he wasn't enough. That dinner, he said. 2 Fridays ago. Nadine, you said some women are still waiting to feel secure. He straightened his cuffs. I hope Cole makes her feel secure. The sound of his shoes on the restaurant's hardwood floor seemed to echo in the silence he left behind. He didn't look back at the table. He didn't need to. The weight of everything he'd said, everything he'd proven, would sit with them long after he was gone. The Memphis summer sun glinted off the polished glass and steel of the new Graves Logistics Group headquarters. Leon stood in the gleaming lobby, his reflection multiplied in the marble floors and floor-to-ceiling windows. Outside, 3-foot-high letters announced Graves Logistics Group to everyone passing on Interstate 40. The building itself had become a landmark, visible proof of what quiet work could build. Inside, the halls hummed with activity. 200 new employees had joined in the past year, many of them from Memphis's North Side. Leon had made sure of that. His mother's photo still sat on his desk, now in a larger office on the top floor. But the spirit of her belief in him filled the whole building. He'd upgraded to a new F-150, but that was his only visible concession to success. The man who signed the $700 million contract was the same man who'd started with 1 truck and a storage unit, just with more resources to work with. The annual job fair filled the building's main conference center. Young faces moved between booths, clutching resumes and dreams in equal measure. Leon watched from near the entrance, nodding occasionally to employees who passed. Brenda, now a board member, was leading a session on financial literacy. Down the hall, Desiree ran operations briefings with the precision that had earned her the president's role. Victor had become general counsel, his office just down from Leon's. They still met for coffee most mornings, talking about growth and next steps. The federal contract had opened doors, but Leon's steady execution had blown them wide open. A young man approached hesitantly. maybe 20 years old, wearing a crisp white shirt that still had shopping creases. He held himself with the careful dignity of someone who knew this moment mattered. "Mr. Graves!" His voice was steady despite his obvious nervousness. "I'm Marcus Thompson. I wanted to thank you for hosting this." Leon shook his hand. "Welcome, Marcus. Tell me about yourself." "I've got one truck," Marcus said. "Been running local routes for 6 months. One steady client, a furniture warehouse. I make their deliveries 3 times a week." He paused. "It's not much yet." "It's exactly what I started with," Leon said. Marcus nodded, gathering courage. "That's actually why I wanted to talk to you. I've been offered 2 more regular clients, but taking them means buying a second truck, hiring a driver." He looked down, then back up. "How did you know when you were ready to grow?" Leon studied the young man, seeing echoes of his own past. He thought about the dinner that changed everything, the contempt around that table, the folder that documented betrayal, the contract that proved them all wrong. He thought about quiet mornings building something real while others slept. "When you stop needing anyone to believe in you before you do," he said finally, "that's when you're ready." Marcus's eyes widened slightly. "Even family?" "Especially family," Leon said softly. "Build it right, build it steady, and let the results speak." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a business card. "Call my office Monday. We have a mentorship program, and we're always looking for reliable subcontractors while you grow." Marcus took the card like it was made of gold. "Thank you, Mr. Graves, for everything this means." Leon watched him walk away, back straight, possibility replacing nervousness. Around them, the job fair continued. Hundreds of dreams taking shape under the Graves logo. 18 months had changed everything and nothing. The betrayers had faced their consequences without drama. Philip had returned the money within 10 days, his practice quietly bleeding clients who heard whispers of impropriety. Cole had vanished from Adrienne's life the moment the true settlement numbers became clear. No scenes, just slow withdrawal until his texts stopped completely. The divorce had finalized in 4 months. Adrienne received her legal share of their liquid assets, fair by law, but far below what she'd planned for. She'd moved to a smaller house in a neighborhood her old friends didn't visit. Leon heard she'd taken a job at a real estate office. He didn't think about it much. In the conference center, Brenda wrapped up her session. Participants gathered around her, asking questions, taking notes. Through the windows, the afternoon sun caught the building's letters, casting long shadows across the parking lot where 18-wheelers bore the Graves logo. Leon straightened his tie and headed toward his next meeting. There was always more to build. I hope you enjoyed that one. Be sure to like the video and subscribe so you don't miss the next story. I've picked out 2 more for you that I think you'll really like.